everyone. So, I drink a little bit. Don't tell anyone. It's okay. I'm an adult. I'm of the age 21. It's my little Minecraft calendar there. It's not a real calendar though because it's a Gregorian calendar, but those are fake months. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. Those are just selected 28 or 30 or 31 day segments to fit into a solar year that doesn't care about what the moon cycle is. And I have someone asking me, can you do this work? It's the first day of the natural month. And Jewish people will say it's Rosh Hashanah. If you Google it, for some reason it says it's a new year. It's not the new year, it's the first day of the 7th real month, lunar month. And nature, the plants, the animals, they're in tune with this. Guys, I need to talk about some things. Look, I'm in pain most of the time because I'm thinking about things that I feel like I understand but other people don't understand. And it's not enjoyable to experience that. It's painful. It's not like, oh, I'm so smart, I'm happy. Well, first of all, even at say you equate being relaxed and happy and kind of at ease with having money. Being smart doesn't even make you rich necessarily. Could help, but doesn't mean automatically that you're going to be rich. So there's that. And I'm not making any other claims in that statement. And I'm not even making the claim that I'm smart. I'm just stating what I think is a true statement, true proposition. But it's painful because when I start to realize something like, oh, this is a method of asserting control, get everyone to use your calendar, your system, and then send your people out to check and enforce that they are following your directives, essentially. That's a way to assert your power, assert your authority. It's not real authority, though. It's like asserted authority. It's like a fake. There's such a thing as real authority. I believe, and it has to do with the fact that you actually have a human physical body and you're able to move things in the universe. And it doesn't mean that I understand it all. It's just that it's real in the fact that you don't have to kind of manipulate things. You don't have to trick people. But let's talk about Craig, because this is painful for me because I feel like I understand this type of person, if that makes sense. Like, I understand these types of people that sometimes I understand these types of people that most people would categorize as just different, maybe autistic. Okay. The problem I have with this type of the problem I have with calling someone autistic or calling someone Asperger's is that there's a lot of people who just assume that somehow a degree or somehow having some official education automatically makes certain things more true than other things, when that's not how it works. Math is more true than science, and science is more true than opinion, basically, is the way I understand it. Because science, and I'm just using that term loosely, what I really mean is the set of evidence that you can see. But math proofs are, you could try to say that's evidence, but they're also absolute, so there's no room for errors. There's no guessing added to trying to come to conclusions about math. It's absolute. So when you do a math proof, there's no way there could ever be an incorrect proof that you actually validated, because every single step is 100%. Not even probability wise, it's absolute, because you could try to say something 100% equals the same thing as absolute, but imagine I'm pointing randomly a line. What's the chance that I'm going to hit a little dot? There's infinite dots, and they're infinitely dense, and yet 0% chance that I'd hit one. That's a rational number. It would be a real number, right? The coordinate that I'm pointing to. And yet there's infinite rational dots, so they're infinitely dense, and I could still, in theory, point to one. So if I could point to one, but there's 0% chance that I would that if given a uniform distribution of choices of an angle, I would not select one, then how could I point to one? See, so 0% does not mean impossible. It just means like it's the limit of the probability. So probability theory is kind of a weird thing, but basically math is absolute. So it's literally absolute. It's even better than 100%. It's just perfect. Either the logic is defined or it's not. And when it's defined, either it fits or it doesn't. It's like binary. It's like there's no in between at all. You can make mistakes, you can make errors, but the errors or mistakes are not part of the logic itself. That's part of somebody observing the logic, basically. So, like 1 + 1 = 2. Like you can look at it 1,000 times and then accidentally be like, oops, I accidentally read the second one as a 2. Like, that would still be your error. It'd be unlikely, but it's still not a problem in the actual logic. It's a problem in somebody just making, an error. When it comes to Craig Wright, it's like, I understand this type of person. Okay. I bring up this autistic thing because it's hard for me to accept that it's a real thing, because when you classify, say some group of people came together and they started just classifying people, like you support Trump or something, and you get all these, I don't know, maybe left extremists, but they think that they're normal. They think that communism is smart or something, because they think, oh, we should just be nice and distribute resources, and this is the right way to do things. And rich people are just selfish, and they don't understand that. Like, no, that's what the bias is, that these supposed rich people actually know what they're doing so well, but you can't tell just by looking at it as a normal human being. And so, for example, like in Ukraine, when billions of people starved, when they tried to redistribute and make everyone like into farmers, people actually didn't know how to be farmers. It wasn't that the rich farmers were selfish, it's that they knew what they were actually doing, and people didn't know how to understand that. They didn't know how to perceive that. They just assumed, well, you're rich, you're not just giving away your resources, you're selfish. And that's just not true. That's just not the case. Maybe they were a little rich, maybe they were a little selfish, but they actually knew what they were doing, probably more than what the people judging them assumed, basically. And like, that's why, so that's free market, why it exists, in my opinion, because we don't have Condorcet voting. And Condorcet, if you're actually going to vote for what people want, you would want to use Condorcet voting. You would want to take all the information of what they know, because the second most wanted, say, candidate, 50 candidates, might be the most wanted candidate, but not win anyone's first votes. So they might be the first one to be, say, even if you had like a first not voted in gets kicked out system, they would get kicked out first still, even if they were the most wanted in the entire list. So why am I saying all this stuff? Because people who don't think mathematically, but also don't understand these concepts, or some mixture of that, which is like most people, like average people, they don't know how to perceive the world in this way. So they don't, and not everyone understands like this concept of like, there's people out there who genuinely like to learn. Like they genuinely like to study. They genuinely like to understand things. And Craig Wright is like that type of person. And some people would just, in their brain, it's like the same thing with Trump. It's like Trump is just being selfish some way. We don't know how. We just know that he's somehow being selfish, because why would he be president if he's got all this money? Like, they don't understand that he actually is the first president to lose money. In my brain, it makes sense that he's the only president that doesn't have any ancestors who were slave owners. Because to me, it makes sense. Because it's not the way he taught, like, I know this, I know that. That's very surface level type of personality. And sometimes people who actually do know things can come across that way, because maybe they should, because they actually do know things. But it actually makes sense to me, because when you actually understand the way these people think, they don't need or want slaves, because they actually are like self-sufficient and value-producing people who actually genuinely work hard and know how to genuinely manage resources. So Craig Wright is like this type of person, and people would say, like Judge Miller said, like, oh, there's no way this is Satoshi. It doesn't match like the person. It's like, yes, he matches perfectly, because Satoshi is somebody who supposedly should be like a trillionaire, but yet somehow doesn't go and like sell coins and be like, okay, let's start the next wave of, like, if that's Satoshi, like, if you actually understand math and you understand the original designs and you actually read all the things that Satoshi would say, it's like, why would somebody think that Adam Back would be Satoshi over Craig Wright? To me, that's like the most illogical thing, because you have SegWit, which removes the whole substructure of what Bitcoin actually is, which is everyone has a sovereign signing. It's like a new system of, it's actually a third. If you know finances, the debit credit system has been around for 600 years. That's called second. What is it called? It's hold on, I have to look this up. Double entry accounting. Triple entry accounting would be the Bitcoin ledger system. And the Bitcoins themselves have to be signed and moved over. You can't duplicate them. So double entry accounting, if you think about it, it makes perfect sense that we would have switched over to using that already, right? Because when you think about what debit and credits are, if I were to purchase, say, some order of parts to build cars or something like that, and I'm just saying it like that because that's kind of what I've been doing lately, driving trucks, to earn a paycheck. When I actually receive it, I sign a document saying that I've received whatever that is, but that doesn't mean that it's paid for at the time that I receive the parts, right? Because I have to send some kind of like US dollars or something. I have to make sure all these sheets balance. If I didn't have that system and I had to literally hand the money to the forklift driver, and the forklift driver literally had to pay the truck driver when he delivered the parts, the truck driver would actually have to buy the parts and then sell them at the warehouse, if every transaction had to be balanced instantly, nobody could do these things where they like owe each other in order to balance the transaction. But when you think about it, if I go to even just a cafe and I pay for coffee, do they give me the coffee instantly, or do they expect me to kind of like give them $5 and then they go prepare the coffee and then they give it to me, right? There's actually a couple transactions there because I paid the money, and they can actually document that instantly right there, finalized, and it's in their system like, oh, we have this credit. We have this, this basically, it's like an investment of $5, but we're expected, then to balance this out by then generating this cup of coffee, which is going to cost us an expense of $5 in labor and resources. So then when we hand the coffee back to this person, maybe we won't give them a receipt because maybe legally we can work around it. But technically that's also another transaction because they're receiving this product. And because you separate the two transactions, it becomes 10 times easier because you're able to do all that. You're able to pay at a separate time of when you're moving the actual resources, and you're able to balance things out, and you're able to just like, I can even separate paying, I can pay them some cash and I can say, oh, I owe you 60 cents, and they can start making the coffee, and then I can go back and bring 60 cents. Technically that's how debit credit system works, and that's only like a 600-year-old system. But a triple entry accounting system's even more sophisticated. It's even more advanced, and that's what the original design of Bitcoin did, and then there's all these other aspects, like when Craig brought up and this just disgusts me, when he explains, like, for example, like, oh, you want the network to be, heavily connected. You don't want to just have nodes distributed everywhere. Of course you want to use SPV nodes, because otherwise how are you going to check, efficiently transactions when the block size gets big? And they're like, well, we're not even going to let it get big. It's like, this explains so much, because it's so funny. These people are cheering for Vitalik, like, oh yeah, we trust you because you're going to make a layer 2 system which privately owns and centrally controls our access to be able to use money instead of real money. Like, why would we want sovereign ownership of real commodity by this fraud Craig guy? Because he didn't sign what let's go look at this blog post again. Oh, he made a blog post that explains how signing works. And let's see, would Satoshi, let's just use common sense here for a second. Would Satoshi reveal himself? Yes or no? Is that a Satoshi like thing to do? Reveal himself? Yes or no? Common sense says no, because if he would, then he wouldn't be Satoshi. He wouldn't be hiding, right? I mean, they even make like an idol of him where he's like a hooded character. So it's like, does he reveal himself? Yes or no? So when Craig is being like asked all these questions, it's like, oh, you're a fraud. You're just making these things up. But he doesn't want to go and sign and like prove to the world who he is. It's like, how is that not matching with Satoshi? Like, Satoshi doesn't want to kind of reveal to the world who he is. He prefers not to. And that's exactly what Craig said. Like, he prefers not to. And Vitalik twisted it and acted like, oh, well, he's trying to prove who he is, but he decided for some reason to use the harder method. No, he's not trying to prove who he is. There's a difference between publicly, like, me putting, like, there's a difference between me going up to the police department and being like, here's the evidence of everything you can incriminate me for. And me telling my friend, like, hey, I'm going to be honest with you, like, this is what my life is like, and, this is kind of what I've had to deal with in my life, But I'm not going to, like, just go, there's a huge difference between how I presented the information and who I presented it to. And so, like, he doesn't want somebody to, like, suddenly have this, like, certifiable information of, like, oh, you have possession, but did we legally prove like who you are because maybe we want to try to act like you did some you did something to this guy or something, and maybe he doesn't want, like, for example, this is just a theory but it makes sense to me. Maybe he wants the network to genuinely grow because, see, he created a genuine commodity. He's not creating some kind of fake coin. He's not creating some alt. He's not creating something that he gets to keep some initial creation. And as long as you get his approval, then you can kind of maybe get like a piece of it. And he didn't create a security. He created a commodity. So to make it a genuine commodity, it has to be out there. And other people have to have had the chance to build on it and grow on it. And only when that's the case do you actually allow it to be a real thing. And of course you don't want nodes voting and changing how the rules work, because then that subverts how Bitcoin works, which is not majority rule. It's private key rule. So that means it doesn't matter if the majority is against you. If you sign that you paid someone, or you didn't sign that you paid someone, that's your choice. That's not the majority. The nodes don't get to decide whether or not you paid someone else. You and only your private key gets to decide whether you paid someone else. That's how Bitcoin works. Nobody ever said, well, we get to vote. Since when do we even have a voting algorithm that actually gets the consensus of everyone? We don't. Especially when we vote, like, for president of the United States. Definitely not. So that doesn't even make sense. So, like, when you use a protocol like HTTP, like Craig said, one person created it, and then people get to decide, on their own if they want to use that protocol or not. But if everyone's using it, there you go. You have a protocol. You can make a version 2, but everyone will have to use that version 2 and decide that they want to use it. Otherwise, how are you going to stop someone from continuing on using the first version? You're really not going to. So, this is really dumb, And then the Turing completeness, man, like, you take a block of information, you update it, right? And that's your program state, that's your variables, that's the code state, whether you're doing a reduction type language or you're doing a procedural type language and you want to keep track of which line you're on, or however you want to think of it. It doesn't really matter, because that's all you need, is you just need the ability to make a transaction to update program state. I mean, when you do a git commit on software, like, what are you doing? You don't even have to make a new copy of the software. You can just make a commit that shows what the new changes are. And because Git is deterministic, it knows how to reproduce every version of that software that you made without having thousands of copies. It's the same thing with iterating a smart contract. You can do that with basic opcodes. You don't need to add a looping thing where you have to pay nodes to do looping for you. Ethereum is pretty much a joke because of that. And the fact that everyone was laughing at Craig and Gavin, and this is where I was like, this was the first few days when I was like looking into Craig, and I was like, what's going on? Like, who is this guy? I think this sounds familiar. And when I read the part where he says, Bitcoin is great in the hands of Gavin, when I specifically read that Satoshi is the one who wrote that, I was like, oh, okay. See, I understand that this actually means something. When somebody says something like that, you want to go listen to that person. And sure enough, you go listen to Gavin, and what does Gavin say? Oh, it's, Craig is, you guys might not like him, but, I have to say, like, he's the guy. And what does Vitalik do? He laughs and, of course, asserts the false argument. But then somehow that entire crowd is just like, yeah, you're right. He's a fraud. It's like, hold on. How are those paid actors? Like, come on. Like, what is going on here? How is he going to say something that makes no sense? You listen to Craig actually respond to this, And he asks people are like, you're just a fraud, aren't you? And blah, 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 blah. And then he says, did you even read the blog post? Like, he literally asked them, like, did you read it? And they don't even, like, answer him. So it's like, who's the one not giving the information for their burden of proof? Like, it's so ridiculous. Like, his whole point is that he was never trying to prove anything with that blog post. But that blog post, he was just trying to explain, hey, if somebody wanted to sign, this is like the method of they would, that they would use. But that's zero evidence that he would actually want to sign. In fact, my personal preferences is that I would not want, like, people that say, oh, the market's decided. I don't even want BSV to go up, even if I'm investing into it. Because if it goes up too high, I can't really invest into it anymore. It's like the same thing with proving who he is. Like, Bitcoin is not a social construct. It's a protocol. So, these dum-dums, I got to use a nice term, but when these dum-dums try to make all their whole society, like Vitalik and Nick Szabo and all these people who are, to me, are just dum-dums now, when they try to make their whole world and make all this fake junk to steal people's money, essentially, and it's really irritating. I would not want to then go out and just prove myself and be like, okay, here's my pearls, and these pearls these are huge value, just insane, astronomical value, and I'm gonna throw it to the stinkiest of the swine, who not only are gonna like just get them all nasty and like disrespect it, but they're going to they're gonna devalue them. I don't want to cast my pearls before swine, as it says. I wouldn't think that Satoshi would do something like that, because that doesn't make any sense. Why would you, if you could select between someone who's going to respect your design, respect your invention, and somebody who's going to trample on it and treat it like it's trash, and who's going to basically falsely accuse you and get everything wrong, but why are you going to purposely hand over everything to them for free, only to take away from the people who actually are genuine, who are going to benefit from your design? Of course you wouldn't. Of course you're not going to just you're not going to fix the world and then hand over the public that you just gave everything over to some scammers who don't want to do anything except just, who maybe they are genuine, but maybe they think they understand everything when they understand just a tad bit, and then they suddenly want to judge you and kill you, remove you, just because they think that they're smarter than you all of a sudden. Just because they think that they understand everything suddenly. It's like when I was in the Army and people were trying to tell me act like I was an idiot because I was talking about large and small objects falling at different speeds because of air friction. And they thought, I'm just this biased idiot who doesn't want to accept science because all objects must fall at the same speed, right? Except I was telling them that that's in a vacuum. So I already not only understood what they were teaching, but I was correcting them for what they were teaching because they didn't understand the science. And not only was I nice to them about it, but then being correct, but then they were mean to me and they wanted to gang up on me as though I am this jerk, even though they're not even correct. So it's there's a character difference. And this is clear for people who don't understand, maybe they don't understand if Craig is correct or not, but they watch and they see how Craig doesn't censor anyone. He doesn't tell anyone to be quiet. But what does Vitalik do? Oh, why are you letting this guy even into the conference at all? It's like, hello, that's censorship. And he doesn't understand the concept. This is the way the fact checker people think. The people who work for the government, and they work for like the 3-letter agencies, because they're so smart, and they want to control the narrative because they're allowed to decide what's true and what's not. But obviously free speech doesn't work, right? Like, obviously people can't decide for themselves, or should be given more ability to decide for themselves what's true, because why would we want that to happen? No, we should just give all control and all praise and honor and worship, and give all power to the CIA, because at least they're always right no matter what. Not math, not science. It's the CIA, We got to let them decide for us what's true or what's not, because regular logic, that doesn't work, because we can't trust humans, to learn regular logic. We have to trust the smart guys, because the CIA, they're the smart ones, so we have to trust them. I mean, intelligence is in their name, so we have to give them all the power and all the glory, and right? I mean, seriously, like that is like the level of delusion and absurdity. Like, you guys have to decide, are you going to listen to me, or are you going to listen to 10,000 scientists out there? Just some dumb YouTuber who doesn't have any physics classes? Or are you going to listen to 10,000 scientists out there and the smart guys, who accept science? Okay? Because I'm going to propose something here. The universe is not headed towards just where everything's going to freeze. How's that for a proposal? Just an idea. I'm not saying I'm 100% sure, but I'm just saying maybe, and this is just an idea, maybe these scientists made a mistake in their math, and they thought, well, the universe is expanding, and therefore, because the second law of thermodynamics, there's going to be, less entropy. There's going to be just spread out particles, and then we're all going to freeze. Okay. Well, what about reversible physics? What about the fact that the universe expanding isn't the fact that it's increasing in volume? It's the fact that there's a change in the redshifting. Hello? Expansion isn't... See, when somebody takes two different theories and they combine them together, you have to combine them correctly. You can't just assume. It's the same thing with the falling objects. They say, well, it doesn't matter if it's the same shape. And I said, okay, but if you have a large solid sphere of copper and 8 smaller spheres, you can't compare 1 with 8. It has to be, one object compared to one object. It's like, yeah, but it's, if you separate all 8 spheres and you think about the fact that they added together, all their mass is the same mass as the one copper sphere. They're the same shape, but they're smaller, and they fall slower because guess what? They have as much mass, they have as much volume, but they have more surface area. You're not scaling the problem because you're assuming that the size of the object and the shape of the object scales with time and space measurements the way that you're assuming. If I double the length of an object, guess what? Its area, surface area, multiplies by 4. Its volume multiplies by 8. So already, just by resizing things, you made things more complicated than just doubling them. So assuming like that all objects are going to fall at the same speed just because you think that somehow magically the way time passes is going to be the same. It's going to apply linearly, just as, like, you think that I'm going to drop a huge massive cube, but there's no way that if I slice that cube up into 8 smaller cubes and increase the surface area, that those 8 smaller cubes can't be thought of as a group that has the same mass, the same volume as one large cube, but with more surface area. It's the same thing with these scientists who think, we have to use a cyclical reasoning of why they think certain things are certain ages. and cyclical reasoning of why they think, the second everything has to move towards disorder. That is not true. You can do a simple simulation with bouncing particles, and it looks exactly the same in nature forwards as it looks backwards. Reversibility in physics in a closed system, which means you're not changing the volume. Second law of thermodynamics is saying if you change the volume, that's just it. See, the universe, there's no evidence that the universe is actually changing in volume. If you have a planet, if you have a human being even, or an organism, and you say, hey, it's going to decay, that's because it's going out and expanding and taking over more, basically taking up more space. And yet what's funny is people say things always decay, but it's just like, then how do new animals get born and start growing again? Because if you think about it, like that kind of balances out. Like you literally have populations that will go from small to large, and it's like, hold on, is order decreasing or is order increasing? It's like, we're talking about a planet here, which is not a closed system because any heat that's coming out of the planet, and yet we have heat coming in from the sun too. So it's like we have a balance right there. You got black holes, which are producing apparently radiation. It's like, what happens when you collect radiation now? Like what is, it seems like you need like a certain level of intelligence to understand that just our perspective of space-time is a specific perspective. So if you slid things, if you twisted things a different way, you literally could switch space and time, and you could probably have beings and organisms that to us look like they're radiation, and to them we look like we're radiation. But the radiation and a particle are actually the same thing, just from a different perspective. But people don't want to study what it, they don't want to think about what a black hole, for example, actually is. They don't want to actually draw the actual light cones and actually think like, there's a black hole here, what happens to this particle? And I try to explain to people, like, literally the classical definition of direction is that every direction is pointing towards the center of the black hole. That sounds weird. Yeah, because you never try to expand your understanding. You always think of things in terms of classical time, classical space, classical this, classical that, classical everything. You have to expand your understanding of reality and understand how reality actually works according to, and I'm not twisting it. Somebody commented, you're twisting reality. No, this is like literally special relativity is probably one of the most tested things because nobody will believe it. It doesn't even matter how smart they are and what position in the government they are. They're like, oh, we need to go fund like another experiment to prove, because we're going to prove this wrong. It's like, no, you're just going to prove it right again for like the 10,000th time. Einstein showed how gravity works. End of story. You don't need to come up with another theory of how gravity works because Einstein perfectly and completely explained it completely, and it's finished and it's done. And if you think that there's another explanation, it's because you don't get it. It's not because Einstein didn't get it. That's how it works. Either you study it and you understand what gravity is and you realize, oh, it's not a force. This is literally just how space-time is shaped. Then you finally get it. If you still think that it needs to be a force, then you don't get it yet. You don't know where you're going to be like, where's this force coming from? So that's just how intellect works. That's how math works. You either spend the time to understand a more general model when that's the thing dictating the rules, or you don't, and you try to just convince everyone else that you're right, and somehow, these tests, like, if I'm the one twisting reality, then why is every time that I talk about something, it matches with all the evidence? All the math is consistent, so you can check the math box. All the evidence, so any test that anyone ever does, any experiment that anyone ever does and records any type of results of anything that they have observed happening in the physical universe, Let's see. Does that contradict? No. Okay. So I don't get how is it me? So we're gonna throw out science and physics, and we're just gonna go with opinion because opinions somehow that's more correct because these billion people have observed things more than just one person who's documented exactly what they've seen and then wrote down exactly the details, right? Except that when you listen to what they've observed, they haven't actually documented things properly. They haven't explained things properly. They just say, well, we saw detect a force over here. It's like, okay. That's to be expected, actually. So, don't be surprised. Craig was almost immediately clearly Satoshi to me when I first saw videos of him. Almost clearly, it was almost obvious. Like, it just made so much sense to me. Because he was explaining, like, people aren't listening about this and people aren't listening about that. Not only did I understand the computer science, but just the way that this all played out matches so closely with what I've experienced. Because I didn't have people actually coming up to me and being like, you're a fraud. But I had people who were kind of like, I don't think you're that good of a program. I don't think you're... They basically, like, didn't want to... They didn't even think that it was worth communicating with me about things that I would present. And that was with the company runtime verification. So they don't want to listen to me. That's their choice. They could stop and think, why does Tim want to work for this company? That's a good question. Why does he want to work for this company? Because we're trying to do formal verification. There must be a reason why he wants to work here. Is it because he's a genius programmer? Is it just because he wants money? Is it because he's trying to sabotage somebody for absolutely no reason because we're just doing research? Or maybe it's because he's figured out something on his own because he's smart enough to actually do research. Maybe we should see if we've covered all our bases, because formal verification isn't the only piece here. There's also, like, hot swapping. There's also, like, being able to construct math proofs and type structures and logic and computer programs using formally defined transformations. We don't have to worry about whether our C code will compile or not because we won't have these type errors and these syntax errors and these data mismatch errors and things like that because we've solved that problem. And we can export C if we want to because our language is more sophisticated, not equally or less sophisticated. You don't just create a random Turing complete system, or you don't just create a system that you say, well, any programming language can be created in this, and then say that it's a good end product. Lambda calculus is a good end product because it's Turing complete, but also because it's extremely simple, which allows you to work with it, because just because something's Turing complete doesn't make it automatically a good logic system, a good system to work with. Same with this matching logic. Like, just because you can make any programming language in it, well, that doesn't mean it's good, because programming languages, that's an assumption that all programming languages are just good, because why would anyone create something smarter than a traditional, I should say classical, programming language? Why would someone assume that you could possibly ever be intelligent enough to actually bypass the idea of needing to parse and run a type inferencing algorithm to try to determine whether a program makes sense or not? Why would somebody ever think that it's possible to construct a program using formally proven tree transformations? Oh, maybe it's because of that theorem. no, it's an opinion of the silver bullet that you can't just solve these problems in computer science because, well, people guess that it's statistically likely that it would be impossible. Like that, really? That's your proof? That's your proof that you can't make a you can't construct logic using just. I mean, that's why I made a prototype. Because it literally, like, you can just do it on your phone. Like, you can just code using menus, and literally, it's impossible to have syntax errors at all because there's no parsing. So you can't even have a syntax error when trying to make this code on this stupid little prototype iPhone app that I made. And people want to think of it as like, oh, well, that's just an app, you got to make something cool like Linux. And then on Linux, because if it's an app, there's no way it could possibly be an earth-shattering, groundbreaking, mathematically interesting, proven thing. There's no way. It has to look nerd. It can't be flashy because that proves that the math is wrong. If it's flashy, the math is wrong because math isn't flashy. So therefore, the math of anything flashy is wrong. Like, that's their assumption, So that's why I want to make it a little flashy. That's why I like people like Craig Wright who wear like a suit, to go to these things. And then everyone's just like, well, you're not a real developer because you're wearing a suit. Like, okay. You're going to tell him that he's fake because he's wearing a suit. Well, I hope that he really, takes his trillions and says, all right, I'll see you later. You can have fun not wearing a suit. And I'll just kind of own, half the planet. I hope that that's how they can have their half of the planet. That's cool. It's just ridiculous. Somebody says, you can't be wearing a suit. It's like, how does that prove that you're not a developer? What the heck kind of retarded logic is that? That is the stupidest crap. That is the stupidest, and and I'm being nice because really that's offensive stuff. Like, if I repeated what I think should be done to people like Vitalik or Nick Zavo or things like that, my video would not make it for very long because I can't actually tell you what I think should be done to those types of people. I don't like when people have to endure thousands of years of complete agony. It's not fun to think about. But, some people, that's really what should happen to them. Things that are similar to that. But, Craig Wright, he was nice enough to actually explain his answers to every question that anyone would ever give to him. They would ask him. They would talk about something, and then he'd say, well, math says this. Well, this is. Isn't he such a jerk for just being nice enough to not be biased against you and be like, well, I don't like your name. I don't like your suit. But instead, to overlook all of those things and literally just tell you the factual, useful information that would help you and assist you to make the world a better place, to help you be successful in business, to help you make better decisions, and to just give you the facts as they are and tell you the truth. What a jerk. What kind of obstinate guy, what kind of guy would be like that? I mean, come on. How could you possibly like a guy like that? Like, that is off the charts. That's Asperger's type, jerk people act like that. Autistic people act like that. They just tell you the truth and useful stuff. Screw those people. Man. Don't want anything to do with them. Oh, man. So if you guys don't understand sarcasm because you actually are genuinely not just autistic in the sense of like people have come, grouped you together and called you narcissists, like, because you support Trump or something, you're automatically a psychological narcissist and you need to be put in some kind of, internment camp. No, I mean, like, if you genuinely are neurodivergent where your brain actually works differently enough and your experience hasn't taught you to understand. I have been very sarcastic in a lot of parts of this video. And that's because, sometimes it's hard to just communicate to people who don't want to think another way. They just want to go along with like lemmings off the cliff. So I hope that you, as a neurodivergent person, and I expect almost that you would not go and be like lemmings as much or as likely as these other quote-unquote neurotypical people who supposedly are not psychopaths do. So genuinely, I am thankful for people like Craig Wright, because they actually are cool and they get straight to the point and they are just developing things that are useful. And so I say, okay, cool. I like that. Looks like the math checks out, and yes, you're correct about X, Y, and Z. And yeah, let's go build tool A, B, and C to work with that. And also, I have this other idea, and let me present it to you. Like, that's how we should respond to humans like Craig Wright. Instead of kind of forcing them in this corner where they basically want to, should I say, just kill themselves. Like, we have to decide as a society what kind of humans we're going to be like, and if we're going to categorize people in the way that we just feel like, or if we're actually going to be genuine in how we do our science and stuff. Because I've already been shoved in the corner enough. You might want to judge me on whether you think I'm a hard person or not. I don't really, honestly almost don't care, because to me it's not about whether you're a hard person or not. It's about like just whatever's ultimately true. So I could be likable, I could be not likable, whatever. But ultimately, what's true? Like, what matters in the end? Am I going to be somebody who will tell the truth? Or am I going to be somebody who just keeps spreading a lie like a virus and then trying to make that normal and act like that's normal? Because maybe that happens, and maybe you should think about, hey, maybe that happens, and maybe we shouldn't do that anymore as a society, because it's just simply wrong. Or do we need to just let it happen enough to where it's like so ridiculous that, I mean, Jesus getting killed, like, come on, like, that, there should be some kind of like signal there where you think, like, wait a minute, like, even the person who said that he needs to be put to death, like, said, like, this is an innocent man. Like, shouldn't we kind of put together some pieces and think, like, wait a minute, maybe most of these humans are absolute psychopaths, and maybe we shouldn't try to categorize Jesus and be like, well, is he Lord, or is he a lunatic, or is it no? Hello. Why not think that the 99% of these people around who are laughing at him and pointing the finger, maybe they're the lunatics. Maybe they're the psychopaths. Maybe they're the crazy ones who don't know what the heck they're doing. Because maybe you're just obsessed with wanting somehow, for some reason, the majority to be assumed to be right or something like weird like that. Which, if that was true, then I shouldn't have spoke up in my graph theory class, and then I should go back to my professor in that 2008 computer science class and tell him, you were wrong for going in front of the class, and then telling them that I was right, and then proving it by showing an algorithm on the computer screen, because, they all wanted the answer to be B instead of C, and so you should have went with the majority instead of what was mathematically formally proven to be correct, because why would we care about, like, what the math says? We should just go with what everyone's opinion was. Duh. Like, sorry, neurodivergent, special classification, whatever, XYZ, if that even exists. That was sarcasm. But I think most neurodivergents probably would understand sarcasm anyway. So that's my rant for the day, I suppose. And I guess I'm soft, as Gary Vee would say, because I like to go spend $5 and get coffee. Although it's not really at Starbucks. It's more at like these really cool like cafes where these like cool like Christian girls are like the baristas, and like they're everyone's like friendly, but they also like kind of talk about useful things, and like it's more it's actually like a completely almost completely categorically different environment in a sense than Starbucks. But at the same time, I can sit down at Starbucks and kind of study in my computer either way. But it's just nothing about it's very different experience. So, all right, I got a 5 GB file. That's crazy. See you guys next time.